People usually hate goodbyes. We know from our own experience that goodbyes can be painful. Like, for example, when we visit a close family members or friends or relatives, no? Saha, di ba, pag-abot, sadya kaayo, no? Bibo kaayo, enjoy kaayo. But when the time to leave comes, sometimes it is difficult to say goodbye. We may not like goodbyes, but we know that we cannot avoid them. In our life, in my life, for example, as a priest, no, na ay mga changes of assignments every now and then, transfer, you have to say goodbye. And sometimes, it is not easy, no? Especially when you start to grow attachment sa imuhang assignment, sa lugar, sa parokya, for example, i-transfer ka, sa ilisod to say goodbye. But maybe the most painful and even traumatic goodbye is the death of a loved one. Maybe we would do anything to avoid this kind of goodbye. When someone we love is moving on from us, we would like to reverse what is happening. Yet most of the times, we know that we are helpless. And so we have to learn to face the goodbyes. And most people manage to do just that. Somehow they find it possible to let go, even though it takes time. Eventually, people discover that letting go of someone in death does not mean the end of their relationship with that person. And they begin to relate to their loved one in a different way, mostly through prayers. Today, as we celebrate the Ascension Sunday, the ascension of Jesus into heaven, we can only imagine the part of the disciples of Jesus. For sure, the ascension of Jesus into heaven involves a great deal of letting go from his disciples. When Jesus was put to death on the cross, his disciples must have felt that they would never see him again. But then, to their amazement, he began to appear to them, and they realized that Jesus had been raised from the dead. And he appeared to many of his disciples more than once. Yet, the time came when even those very reassuring appearances of the risen Lord has come to an end. And he was no longer present to his followers in a visible form. In our human experience, we normally would like people who are significant for us to be visible to us. Seeing the face of someone we love can mean more than all the phone calls and emails put together. That is why a common experience sa mga airports, sa departure lounge, people would long to keep their loved ones in view for as long as possible. Sige pagtanaw, sa gani bisag nakalupad na ang eroplano, no? Sige paghapog tanaw. Bisag wa na ang ilahang mga loved ones nga gihatod sa airport. Very similar to what happened to the disciples in our first reading today. They were still looking up to the sky. When Jesus was taken up to heaven, ang mga tinunan sigig hangad, sigig tanaw sa panganod. And somebody asked, "Why are you men from Galilee standing here looking into the sky?" One biblical commentator said that somehow looking up into the sky was not appropriate, was not the right action. Because in returning to the Father, the risen Lord had not really left them at all. He was actually present with them in a new way. That is why today's feast of the Ascension is much more of a celebration of the Lord's presence than a lament for the Lord's absence. This is a celebration of the Lord's presence, not a lament of the Lord's absence. And today's gospel expresses that very well, while saying that the Lord Jesus was taken up into heaven. It declares also that the Lord was working with the disciples as they proclaimed the gospel. He was taken from them, and at the same time, He was still working with them. Let this be the emphasis of our celebration today. The Lord is working with the disciples, and the Lord is working with all of us. We usually pray for our beloved dead to have eternal rest. But the New Testament strongly suggests that when Jesus returned to the Father, He did not enter into eternal rest. On the contrary, the risen Lord was working with the disciples as He works with us today. So for Jesus, it is not eternal rest, but eternal work. Because Jesus is still working with us today. Maybe, my dear brothers and sisters, we need to remind ourselves today more than ever that the Lord is at work. And He wanted us to get involved in His work. The gospel reading presents the Lord working with His disciples. He needs His disciples today to work with as much as He need in the first century. And according to our second reading today, the first thing that the Lord did when He returned to the Father was to distribute gifts to His followers so that they could involve themselves in His work. And we can be sure that He is not sparing with His gifts today. The Feast of the Ascension is a good opportunity for each one of us to ask ourselves how the Lord has gifted us, so that we may be able also to share in His work. Because one thing is for sure, we are all gifted to give. Yes, the Lord may no longer be physically present with us, but the Lord's mission continues. And today, we are the instruments of the Lord's mission to continue. So let this be the challenge of our celebration today. Let us allow ourselves to become God's instruments to continue His mission wherever we are, in our respective families, in our respective working environments, wherever we are. Let us be reminded that the Lord continues His work and we are instruments of His work. May God bless us.
Let us all stand.